Good morning, everyone. If a couple of you would just identify in the chat room that you're hearing this webinar getting started, we'd appreciate that. Welcome back to the WIOA Wednesday webinars. It's been a few months now, and we've been busy with all the implementation, along with all of our partners at DHS, IDES, and ICCB, all of our contract staff at Kerr and Breckel, Northern Illinois University, and that. So we welcome everyone back, and today's webinar will be focusing on the regional and local plans and MOUs, the review process. We've had several webinars when we were doing these previously on the MOUs and on the plans, and now we're getting into some of the final stages of getting those going and how we're going to review those on the monitoring side. So we have Kerr and Breckel presenting information today. We have identified staff from each of those core partners that will be here available to answer any questions when we get to that point in the presentation. And again, we thank the Illinois WorkNet staff for setting up the webinars and helping us through these. Just to recap for everyone how to utilize the webinar, on the left-hand side, you see the chat. Everyone's welcoming everyone. It's great to see. During the presentation, we have the phone lines muted. If you have a comment or a question, please utilize that chat pod. Place that in there. We will come back to that at the appropriate time and address it. In the bottom left-hand corner, the document, the PowerPoint, which you'll be seeing during the presentation, is there for you to download. As always, we're recording this webinar, and we will be posting it to the Illinois WorkNet website. We'll post that link later on at the end of the webinar so that everyone can get that to their web access points and save those if you don't already have them. With that, I think we're all familiar with the process. I want to turn it over to Kerr and Breckel staff. We have Christy Jones and Bethany Yeager with us today. So Christy and Bethany, welcome back, and thank you for joining us today.
This is Bethany Yeager with TV. As you recall, we did have a series of webinars in the spring leading up to what was the development of the process to be used for reviewing plans and MOUs. And we last talked to you in May, so that's how long it's been. And today we're going to refresh your memories about the process and then talk about some of the results and next steps. And after our brief presentation, we are going to open it up for question and answers as we usually do. And also, as we usually do, we will have a Q&A document summarizing the questions and answers that will be posted on Illinois WorkNet under the WIOA implementation portal. And Chelsea, if you get a chance at any point throughout this webinar, it would be great if you could put that WIOA implementation portal link in the chat box. So today, I just want to talk about first the process and some of the approaches that we followed to complete the state-level review of regional plans, local plans, and MOUs. And so there's going to be three parts of this. One is the process and the approach. Two is the results, and to give you a little bit of a heads up about what to expect when you get a report with a letter later this week. And that report is summarizing the results of the state-level review. And then we'll end the webinar presentation with some tips and instructions for submitting revised plans and MOUs. So first we're going to talk about the approaches we followed for this review process, and just to give you an indication of what the reviewers were looking for. So the review process was developed by the Interagency Work Group, which has representatives of all required partners who administer the programs under WIOA, in conjunction with a subgroup of those members who were represented on that and were the actual reviewers. The Executive Committee of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board did approve the process before it began, and a memorandum was issued to the local board chairs and CEOs to announce the process. And then determinations were made based on these reviews, and the reviews were rooted in the State of Illinois Regional and Local Planning Guide for the plans, and the Governor's Guidelines with the MOU template for the MOUs. So those were the two documents that really shaped the reviews of the plans and MOUs. The review team was made up of interagency work group members, and all core and required partners were represented on this subgroup that actually reviewed the plans. And each reviewer used a standard review instrument, which is a fancy word for saying a survey, with an average of 90 questions per document. And just to give you an idea of the scope of this review, there were 90 questions and 54 documents. So it took multiple hours per document to review. And so I just want to emphasize that these were thorough reviews and they were fair and complete. And given that there were 54 documents and an average of 90 questions, we split these reviews into 3 cycles over 2 months between July 1st and September 2nd. And so all of those results were compiled by KEB, because we facilitated the subgroup, and presented draft reports to the interagency work group during an all-day meeting in September, on September 13th. And the purpose of that meeting was to ultimately determine what was the status of each plan and MOU, and that would be communicated through a final report. So there were determinations made whether plans were conditionally approved or required changes or not approved, and we'll go through what all those categories mean, but that was the day that the determinations were made. And then these final reports for each plan and MOU will be sent to you, to the local areas, and it'll be sent to the local Workforce Innovation Board chair, with a copy going to the local chief elected official. And then the reports will be emailed by September 30th, as we promised before.
Board staff will also get a copy.
Board staff will also get a copy, and we're asking that the board staff share it with all required partners in their local area. And we'll review all that at the end. Okay, I wanted to give you a little bit of a description of, we said these surveys were between 65 and 117 questions. So what in the world were we looking for? What you see on the screen are the criteria that we used to evaluate each item that was a required content in the planning guide or in the MOU template. So for every item of required content, the reviewers looked at these criteria. Were they complete according to the governing document? Were the answers adequate? Were they did they demonstrate commitment to integration? Were they compliant with the federal rules, the draft rules at the time they were drafted? And were there any program-specific issues that needed to be addressed or that were maybe really good? And then, of course, we did not just document negative things. We were really looking for noteworthy practices to kind of compile best practices that could be used as a resource going forward, and maybe to spark some innovation in local areas. And these noteworthy practices are being compiled into a document for local areas throughout the state, and they will be posted on the WIOA implementation portal on Illinois WorkNet so that you will be able to see them. So hopefully we can get that up soon, and we'll communicate when that's ready. So, we had these 54 documents, many survey questions compiled by at least 4 reviewers, sometimes as many as 12. So that's a lot of documents, and KEB compiled all of that. We put it into a lot of different layers of analysis, and the top level of analysis generated the final reports. So it got down, from the individual question analysis all the way up to what's the common and broad themes that need to be addressed. And we found a lot of common themes, and that's what you will see in the final reports that are issued to you later this week. I also wanted to give you a piece of context here to help explain the approach that we took when drafting the final reports. Because of the timing, plans and MOUs were submitted before the final rules of WIOA were issued, and the final rules significantly changed some service delivery components and cost sharing under WIOA. And so the regional plan and local planning guide, as well as the governor's guidelines, are going to have to be revised. And in fact, the governor's guidelines are almost going to be completely rewritten. So, and that's slated to happen this fall. So the approach for these reports, for any required revisions that the subgroup and the interagency work group approved, we split them into what has to be addressed in program year 2016, which is the current one, or state fiscal year 17, and anything that was beyond program year 2016. So let me explain that one more in another way. Required revisions that were required for PY16 or somewhat immediately, those focus on compliance issues that must be fixed, but that do not depend on the issuance of the governor's guidelines or the revised planning guide. So they are things that you can fix right now. You don't need to wait for further guidance. And actually you must for compliance reasons. There are another set of required revisions that do depend on the revised governor's guidelines and planning guide, and therefore you can't do it until we issue those revised documents. And so those are things that we're kicking out till program year 2017, which starts July 1st, 2017. So there's going to be, when you get the final reports, you will see there are different categories of changes, some that must be made immediately and some that must be made after the issuance of the governor's guidelines and planning guide. And one more note on that, if for PY16 no changes were noted that needed to be made right now, then those plans and MOUs were considered conditionally approved, and I'll explain those, the difference between those in a little bit. So the duration of each document is a little bit different, and we want to make sure we understand, and this also relates to the categories of whether they're approved or not, the determination. So regional plans, consistent with the regs, are still good for up to 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. But the final reports that will be sent this week will require modifications to the plans that will be effective July 1st, 2017. So the plans will be good for the remaining 3 years after those modifications are made. And so that's why under the first dot point on the slide, you'll see that regional plans are good from 2016 to 2020, and they can be conditionally approved pending these required modifications, or they can be conditionally approved with technical changes required, or conditionally approved with substantive revisions required, or not approved. And I'll just say briefly that technical changes are ones that really maybe just a correction or a clarification or an expansion of detail, nothing substantive. The substantive revisions required will probably require more input from the required partners. It's not as easy as just fixing a document. You actually have to have more conversation about that point, or maybe something wasn't even addressed. It needs to be addressed by all the required partners. That's substantive to us, and that's different than just the technical changes that can be fixed on a piece of paper. And then there's always the non-approved. So for regional plans, those are the categories of determinations, and the same are true for the local plans. It's on the same timeline, so they're still good for 4 years, but a modification is required for every local plan, and those modifications must be effective July 1st, 2017. And we will explain what those modifications are. MOUs are slightly different. While the regulations allow for MOUs to be good for up to 3 years, it was agreed that the significant changes in the final rules limit the lifespan of this MOU. So the MOUs are only approved for 1 year this time around. Then that means they're approved through June 30th, 2017. And that also means that MOUs must be renegotiated under the revised governor's guidelines and the final rules, and they must be effective July 1st, 2017. So think of it this way, new MOUs July 1st, 2017. And then those MOUs, once approved, will be good through 3 years, as the regulations allow. So this is the long explanation of all the categories. That's why you see under MOU, approved for PY16 only. That's the only option. No one can be approved for the 3 years right now. It's not possible because every MOU is going to have to be adjusted or revised in some way. Conditionally approved for PY16 only with technical changes required means you did a good job, but there are some minor things that you need to fix or clarify or just correct. And and then you have to renegotiate anyway for PY17. The thought there was that why would we force you to make all these changes in the next 3 months when you're just going to have to renegotiate your MOU starting January 1st anyway? We don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time. We want to do this the right way. Let's fix what has to be fixed right now and push everything else into the PY17 with the new information and guidance from the governor's guidelines and the final rules. That's the thinking. We wanted to give you a little snapshot of the view statewide of where the regional plans, local plans, and MOUs fell in these categories of determination. We have to say that regional plans were really mostly in good shape. We're happy with them, but all will have required modifications to be effective July 1st because the procedures for negotiating performance levels and other little changes, they depend on further guidance. So they all are going to have to be adjusted in some way. That's why the category is conditionally approved, because there are required changes that just happen because there are things that haven't been issued yet. Local plans are a little more varied. They, again, all require some level of changes related to performance and the procurement of one-stop operators, as well as career services, because career services changed in the final rule. And a lot of these changes they just need to be more specific. The local plans don't need to just describe what will be done, but how it will be done and demonstrate a commitment to integration. That is probably the biggest theme for PY17, which starts July 1st. There has to be a more specific demonstration of a commitment to integration. We understood that PY16 there might not be great detail in how integration is currently in place because it's still considered a transition year. So that's why it's a little bit of a pass this year on the commitment to integration. We took note of where it was demonstrated, but everyone, every local area, every region needs to be more committed and demonstrative of a commitment to integration for the next round of plans and MOUs. And that will be clearly stated in the final reports. MOUs, lastly, are also varied. You'll notice that only 2 were approved for PY16 only. 2 were also not approved. So all of the MOUs require significant changes. Most of them, though, depend on the revised governor's guidelines and therefore are going to be folded into the PY17 MOUs that start July 1. Okay, you can keep it right there, Mark. We wanted to show you some specific themes to MOUs. So this is not for the plans or regional and local plans. This is just for the MOUs. These are, what you see on the slide are common themes by section of the MOU template. So there were still missing signatures in many, and some were at a state level because of some process that needed to happen that were out of your control. Others were some outstanding issues that still needed to get the agreement of some partners. Either way, missing signatures are still a problem, as usual. I know you've had experience with that. Another section, for example, vision for the system. The description of the vision must also include actions and timelines for implementing aspects of the vision that are not yet in place. And a lot of these are rooted in the regulations, and in the final reports you will see a citation to the regulations with that exact language of what the required content is. Another one is the MOU development must describe the process to negotiate the MOU, and it also must describe a process if consensus is not reached. A lot of the MOUs describe the process that was used this time around, but they didn't say what would happen if you didn't agree. And that actually is required content in the regulation. So I'm not going to go through all these. You can see almost every section had some common theme, and it's just something we want to use these final reports is constructive criticism, ways that you can improve for next year. We're not trying to dock anyone for a good or bad plan. It's just there are ways we can improve here. There are specific citations that can guide what's required of you in your plans and MOUs, and so we're trying to use this as a way to help you do that. So you can read this slide on your own time and also ask us any questions if you need to about those sections. Okay, I wanted to give you a little, this is the heads up part about the final reports, what you expect when you get them by September 30th. there's going to be a cover letter that will explain a lot of what I presented today in probably more articulate ways, but it'll recap the duration of the regional plans, local plans, and MOUs. It'll say that there's going to be revised planning guides and governor's guidelines issued this fall, and then it's going to give you the instructions for submitting your revised plans and MOUs. So the cover letter is very important. After the cover letter would be a summary telling you the status and the determination of each regional plan, local plan, and MOU in your area. For example, whether they were conditionally approved for PY16 or not. And so on one page, you would have a nice summary of the regional plan is approved or not approved, the local plan is approved or not approved, the MOU is approved or not approved. So you have that one page. And then after that is the actual report, and it's split out by the document. So a regional plan has its own report, local plan has its own report, MOU has its own report. And in the reports, you'll see, like I said, a page number reference to your document and then a citation to the required content that's guiding the requirement. And then you'll see a description of what the state level partners need to see in order to approve the revision. So you'll see the page number, the citation, and the description of the required revision. And we hope that all of that combined will give you good guidance of how to revise these plans and MOUs to the status of approval. Now the timeline can be a little confusing, so we wanted to add this table in an attempt to clarify it or just be as clear as possible. The required revision, remember when I said that there are pretty much two timelines here. One is for immediate changes that are required, and the other one is for changes that are required to be effective July 1st. So for the immediate ones, these are required revisions that need to happen to ensure compliance for PY16. These are due within 30 days of the date of the letter, the date on the notification letter. So when you receive the final report by September 30th, you'll have 30 days to address those required revisions for PY16. Outstanding MOU signatures, the way we're handling this is saying all signatures are due by December 31st, 2016, period. Any other required improvements, these are the ones that must be effective July 1st, 2017. They're going to be folded in to your plans, and the exact due date of that will not be known until the governor's guidelines are issued and until the revised regional and local planning guide is issued. So that's a to be determined, but look for it when the governor's guidelines and revised planning guide come out. And then other observations were made that will be in the report, and those other required improvements are there actually, that's the word used in the final reports. Those are also due on the same timeline to be determined in the governor's guidelines and planning guide. But they, no matter what, they all have to be effective July 1st, 2017. And we will, let me see if I want to make sure I didn't miss one thing. We will explain that in another slide. Okay, so we're good. We can move to the next slide, Mark. Thank you. Here are some tips for submitting the revised plans and MOUs. One is respond to each item of required content. Don't skip anything. That was actually a little bit of a problem in some areas in the plans and MOUs. Some dot points of required content were just completely skipped. Don't let that happen. Address every bold item that is required content. Review the final rule citations that are included in the final reports. They're there for a reason as a resource for you so you can see what's required, and that will ensure you are compliant in your responses. And specifically address the required content from the regulations. Number 3 is provide sufficient detail to demonstrate each required partner's commitment to integration in current and future activities. So again, PY16, we understand it was a transition year. PY17, no excuses. Please document it. And even if it's not yet integrated, describe the plans for how the integration will happen. That is satisfactory to us. And number 4 is, repeats what I say, include as much detail as possible about the planned activities with the projected timetables for each required partner's next steps. Don't just say what one partner will do, describe all partners, how they're all going to be committed and what that timeline is. Okay.
Yeah, I would add, this is Mike from Commerce. I'll give you all the same advice DOL gave us on the state plan, is that we'd like to see, and for your own purposes, the plan be able to be used as a reference so that everybody knows what each other is responsible for. So on all these required activities or planned activities that you have coming up, the plan should be a resource so that each partner can look back at this and say, yes, we were supposed to do X, Y, and Z by time A, B, and C. And so everybody knows what everybody else is supposed to do and when, and how that all helps you all work together toward program integration. So if you don't have, if you read this again, if you read your plan again at this point, if you look at it and don't see enough specificity that each partner knows what they're supposed to be doing, then that's a clear indication that you need to beef up some specificity. So.
Thank you, Mike. This is another more, rather than just tips, these are instructions for submitting the revised plans and MOUs, and these instructions are included in the cover letter, so that you will have that as a resource to guide you. So for the category of changes or required revisions that must be made immediately within 30 days of receipt of the date of the letter, there are some particular things that need to happen. One is the revisions need to be shown in the tracked changes tool in the Word program, and they have to be submitted in MS Word, DocX or Doc format using the tracked changes tool, so we can see where you added new or addressed content. Another required or instruction is to submit them within the 30 days of the date of the letter, supported by a copy of the meeting minutes of the local Workforce Innovation Board, showing that the board's formal approval and acceptance of the required revisions. So this is a requirement because we're trying to avoid making you go around and get all signatures in the next 3 months for required revisions for PY16. In lieu of signatures, we're asking for the meeting minutes showing the local board approval and acceptance of those changes. And those, so the required revisions are due within 30 days. Now the copy of the meeting minutes are due within 5 business days of the next local board meeting. So that can be a little confusing, but we want the final, or the required revisions by 30 days of the letter, and the support of the meeting minutes are due within 5 days after the next local Workforce Innovation Board meeting. The next instruction is that the specific due dates for all required revisions and improvements pertaining to the program year July 1st, 2017, again, will be to be determined in the Governor's Guidelines and Planning Guide. And that's expected to come out this fall. And all of the revisions for plans and MOUs will be due to Mike Baker at Commerce at this email address, WIOA plans-MOUs at illinoisworknet.com. That's the same email address that you used to submit the original versions. There are some next steps. Technical assistance is available by emailing that same address, and we'll keep track of it, and we'll encourage state agency and local partners to request assistance. The interagency work group review team that reviewed the first round of plans and MOUs will look at your revisions, and then an official notification of the acceptance or approval of, or whatever needs to happen after the revisions are submitted, will be sent to the LWIB chairs to follow up, the local Workforce Innovation Board chairs. There also, as we have mentioned in previous webinars, is a public dashboard on the Illinois WorkNet site. It'll be available to see in October, and the point of that dashboard is to show the status of every plan and MOU in every region and local area. And once the plans and MOUs are approved, then they will be available for download on that dashboard for the public, anyone in the world to see. So, but until they're approved, they will not be, because we don't want multiple versions out there and one circulated if it's not approved yet. We only want the approved versions circulated and available. Okay, there's another next step that as we get ready to revise the governor's guidelines in particular, we want input from local areas, especially the local board chairs and the individuals who are identified as the lead MOU negotiators. We want their input about what worked, what didn't work, what could be better, what was really challenging, what was a waste of time, or what was ineffective. We want to know all that, and we want to, for example, did the requirement for an impartial individual designated by the local board chair to lead cost negotiations, was that effective, or was it not? That input will be thoroughly considered when we're revising the governor's guidelines. And these are just a few reminders as we wrap up this presentation. Regional local plans are effective through 2020, but that required modification is due to be effective July 1st. MOUs are effective through June 30, 2017 only, and must be renegotiated for July 1st. The guidelines, governor's guidelines and regional planning guide will be issued this fall. And then also, I know it's coming up soon, but January 2017 starts your PY17 MOU negotiations. And this is the last slide before questions. These are just the recap of the reviewers from the interagency work group representing all the required partners who actually reviewed your plans and MOUs.
Okay, thank you, Bethany. We got a couple questions I think we'll go to first, and then before we get to any questions beyond those two, I want to open up the phone lines to our partner agency staff that are on the call today. So bear with us just for a second there. You indicated that the governor's guidelines will be out in the fall with possibly a December date and a webinar to follow. Is that correct, or will they be done before that possibly?
Oh yeah, they might be. The plan is to have them done before that with webinars introducing them in December. So we're not going to, I don't know a specific date that they'll be issued, but the plan is that they would be done and ready to kind of do this training like we did last year about the revised governor's guidelines, and that those are currently planned for December so that they could guide you when you start negotiations in January. Okay, great.
They also ask, are there any other policies being revised to the final regs from a Office of Employment and Training standpoint, Title 1B? We are working on some revisions. We're working on some new policy. We have some assistants helping us. It's just been a very difficult and busy time going through this implementation, as you all know from the local perspective and also at the state level. So we're doing our best to get what we can done. We also are in the process of transferring all of our policy to a new, what we're calling an e-policy portal. So it will read much more like a book than individual policies. So that is taking up a lot of our time. And within that, we're trying to do some of the basic revisions that are required by the change from WIA to WIOA.
I would add that there's also something that's been a little bit of a term in quotes, a super policy mechanism, but these are the policies that would cut across all agencies and all programs under WIOA. And that process is, there is a structure for it. We're still working out exactly how it works between the various groups, but we have our eye on some issues that are going to require policy that cuts across these agencies. They have not been written yet, but they're on the radar and being developed. And we would certainly have a lot of discussion about those before they're final.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is if you are aware of something that is in WIOA or the final rules, those obviously are the ultimate policies that states and local areas, grantees all have to follow. So if you see a conflict between a current policy that was written under WIA with what's in WIOA, please keep in mind the WIOA requirements for the most part will prevail. So if you see a number changed or a definition change, please keep the WIOA information in mind as you are trying to implement policy. So that, that's the simplest thing that we can do first is just to say WIOA prevails in most cases. Obviously, there are still a few things, including performance, that are a little bit different in how they're being implemented, so we can't necessarily say that from a 100% standpoint. Also, when we issue policy, we go from a new or an old policy to a new one, try to make those revisions. We're going to ask for all of our partners and all of our grantees, local areas, to help us in finding holes where we maybe missed something. We're all humans, and every time we review these, we're finding where we missed changing something simple even. So we'll ask for your help on that. So just bear in mind with us, we are moving along as best we can. When we get the 3 other agency partners on the call here, we'll ask maybe that they want to, if they have any additional information on policies that relate to their programs, they can mention that as well. Next question, is there a timeline when these will be coming? Again, we just kind of, Bethany and I just kind of mentioned it. They are coming slower than most people expect or hope for, but we are working on them, and so we will try to get to them as quickly as possible. We have a schedule for some of the biggest ones that need to be either written new or rewritten, revised from what was existing under WIA. So there will be several that will be worked on. We're putting together work groups that will include local areas as well as agency partner staff. So that's how we're going about that without really having any particular deadlines for any of those. Then finally, who is responsible for getting signatures at the state level on these documents?
Pam, if you're referring to like TANF and the voc rehab signatures, the interagency work group is aware that that's an issue, and we are working on that at the state level. So we are trying to assist on those. If you have other state level signatures in mind, please let us know, but we are aware of all of those, and the work group is handling that one.
Okay, we've got more typing going on, but before we move on to any other questions, go ahead and place those in the chat pod, and we'll get to those in a minute. I want to open up the phone lines. I think they're already unmuted, and let the 3 core partners that have joined us today speak. So, Levon, if you want to speak on behalf of the Community College Board, please provide us any other additional information beyond what Bethany provided today, or if you have anything specific to continued implementation, especially around policies.
Good morning. At this point, nothing specific that, ready to talk about in any detail with policies that would be specific to adult ed. The only thing that has come up across the board, it has been how many signatures there are, particularly for adult ed, because of all the providers. And that was particularly painful in LWIA 7 and EDR 4 because of all the community colleges in that area. So there were lots of Perkins signatures, there were lots of adult ed signatures that had to be obtained, but because the way things are structured, they each have to sign off. I know we'll take a look at that. I don't know if there will be really any way to really make a formal change because they have local control. So that's one thing, if that makes any sense. And then the other thing I wanted to go back and just reinforce something that Bethany did say. As a reviewer, one of the things that that truly to think about is that addressing each element, and Bethany hit on that, even if you're not there yet, and you say we're not there yet, but here's what we're planning, it's critical just to state that. When it's missing, we're like, okay, are they not doing anything? Did they not understand? Don't they care? So I mean, it leaves it open. So even if you're far off from getting there, it's better just to state something and put it in there, like we're working on it. We're having, the partners are we're working towards this, we've got this partner, or, wherever you are. I think that was, to me, that's a critical element, that it just shows that at least it's on your radar. So I think probably at this point, if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer them. But I think that's probably it right now. The only other thing I could think of is that I know maybe, Bethany, we are probably will be doing some, in the governor's guidelines, more detail on infrastructure costs and that sort of thing.
Yes, there will be lots more detail and rewriting in that area. That's already begun.
And so that will be in the governor's guidelines, and there is a group that we're working on that.
Yep.
So.
Great, thanks, Levon. Janice, on behalf of the Department of Employment Security, hello.
Hi, good morning. I actually don't have anything, but I am definitely here for questions if anyone has any.
Okay, great. We will be unmuting all the lines here. Chelsea, first, John, are you here from Department of Human Services? We see you logged in, but we don't see a telephone number that was given to us. So if you're on the line, go ahead and speak on behalf of them. Otherwise, we're going to open up, if you would, Chelsea, just open up all the phone lines. So let's give John or someone else from Department of Human Services Rehabilitation is available and wants to speak to their program before we open up the lines for additional questions, please do. Okay, just a second, John's typing in. He may not be. Okay, all the lines are unmuted, John. Are you muted on your end by chance? Just on your phone? While we're waiting on John, I do want to add a couple things. We'll take a moment of silence to speak. As far as policy goes, like I said, we are working on some new ones. One that will be coming out, it's actually not policy, it's a notice. We've been speaking for several weeks, even months, about updating the demand occupation training list. So for those individuals on this call that are familiar with the ETPL list and the requirement to pull from the demand occupation list, we are updating that. It will be live on October 1st. We will be sending out a WIOA notice, if not today, tomorrow, identifying the lists for each of the economic development regions as well as the statewide list. We did change the criteria a little bit, but for the most part, we relaxed the criteria that was under WIA before, which would allow more occupations based on the data provided to us by IDS. So we will issue that, and we will maybe use one of our future webinars to have a discussion on that, as well as the training provider and program eligibility policy if people have questions with that. So, John, are you available?
I am. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry about that. I have nothing further other than to just reemphasize what was said earlier about making sure that everything was complete throughout the plans. That was it.
Okay. Great. Thanks. And then, Mike, anything additional for behalf of Title I?
Just in general, on behalf of the interagency work group, to emphasize a point that Bethany was hinting at earlier, this was certainly not a game of gotcha. We are pulling for all the regions and local areas to have very robust plans and documents, and these reviews were done in the spirit of trying to help everybody get to the point they need to be, first to be compliant with the Act and the final rules, but also position you all to succeed in implementation of WIOA as we move toward program integration and greater collaboration across the programs. So just keep that in mind when you get your review letters, that they are intended to help everybody get to where they need to be as quickly as possible in the time frames that we all have in front of us.
Okay, the phone lines are open. I don't see any other questions in the chat pod. If anyone has any questions they want to present over the telephone line, please do so now, and we'll go ahead and address those as appropriate. Okay, with it doesn't appear with any other questions. We appreciate the time Bethany and Christy put into this and the actual presentation. Thank you to all the partners for joining us and providing a little insight into your program. And everyone else, again, welcome back and thanks for joining us. Keep looking for emails from Christy identifying the next set of webinars. We don't actually have anything for next week identified yet. We want to work with the agency partners and allow them time to utilize these webinars for presentation to their staff, their grantees, and include you as well to make this a collaborative effort. But we want to make sure we're not focusing only on our program, but letting them focus on theirs as well. So again, we appreciate your time, and we look forward to the next time. Thank you.